I can't even imagine. Have you heard those words and thought, neither can I? But then, it happened. Life took a turn you weren't expecting, and somehow you kept going. You are not alone. Your story matters, and we're here to talk about it. We're two moms, lifelong best friends, and we know what it's like when life throws the unexpected our way. Here we share real stories of struggle, strength, and hope. Because through every challenge, a new path unfolds, and where hardship meets strength, purpose is found.
Welcome to episode 22 of I Can't Even Imagine. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Stephanie.
Today we are talking to Jody. She is a mother of two, a certified life coach, and the author of Mommy Reboot, a busy mom's guide to self-care. This conversation is raw, emotional, and deeply important. Jody opens up about navigating two heartbreaking experiences: her son's suicide attempt at 17 and the loss of her father to suicide when she was just 15. Through her story, she shares how these life-altering moments shaped her not only as a mother, but also as a human being, a healer, and a guide for others. We talk about the chaos of crisis, the ambulance rides, the hospital stays, the mental health system, and the gut-wrenching uncertainty of watching your child fight to live. We also talk about what comes after. Jody walks us through how she leaned on her intuition, embraced radical acceptance, and found peace in the midst of unimaginable pain. This episode is about survival, but also about transformation. It's about what it means to truly show up for your child and for yourself when everything feels like it's falling apart. If you're a parent, if you faced mental health struggles in your family, or if you're just searching for light after darkness, this one's for you.
Jody, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, ladies. It's an honor.
And then for those that don't know, which is everybody except for you, Jody and I go way back. I was actually trying to remember like when I first met you, and I can't. It's like I think I met you before you started dating Josh, but I don't know how. Like I don't know where our lines crossed. Do you? Do you remember at all?
We met because I was dating Josh. So we met in 2008.
Okay.
We went to a hockey game, I think, with Joe and you.
You were a blondie back then.
You were pitch black. You had like dark hair.
Not so much anymore.
Times have changed.
Times have definitely changed. And how long have you been away from Florida now?
It will be 5 years this December since we moved to Texas.
Okay. For some reason, I felt like it was longer than that.
No, it feels long, but no.
Were you guys were, I thought you were traveling. Were you guys living weren't you guys like in an RV or something?
We did that for a hot minute in 2015. That was a long time. That was in Florida.
I wish I could do that, but I would probably drive my family off a cliff.
There's a season for everything.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jody. So I know we got to get into some really heavy stuff. So if you would like to just go ahead and we'll go ahead and open that door.
Okay. So back in 2022 in March, I have two boys. And my oldest at the time was 24.
Okay.
And my youngest, Evan, was 17. And at 2 a.m., I think it was a Sunday night, so like technically Monday morning, I hear the doorbell ring. And like, you know how when you're in that like half sleep, half awake, like what's happening? And where our bedroom window was the driveway. And so I just kind of like look and I see an ambulance and like 2 or 3 cop cars. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, I don't know why we had our own driveway. So I didn't know why I thought this, but I'm like, they must need us to like move our cars or something. Like had nothing to do with us. So I go downstairs, I open the door and there's an officer there and she introduces herself and she's like, "Are you Evan's mom?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, we have Evan in the ambulance. He had ingested whiskey, Tylenol, NyQuil, and Dayquil as an attempt." And I was like, okay. And I was just like absorbing the information, but like, and it was registering, but I'm like, this can't be happening. Like, no, Evan's upstairs sleeping in his bed.
Was he home when that happened?
Yeah, he had been home upstairs sleeping as far as I knew in his bedroom. And so I'm like, okay, is he okay? And she said, yes, he's alive and he's okay, but we need to take him into the hospital. And I didn't know the extent of anything yet. So I slapped some clothes on. I packed my bag. I jumped in the ambulance with them, and off we went. We arrive at the hospital, and we're immediately separated. He's over on the gurney. Doctors are addressing him. I'm at like this information desk, sort of just getting all the information as him as a patient, for me as a mom. And so I'm watching my kid just bawl his eyes out. He was awake, obviously, but he was beside himself. And I just remember feeling so like, I don't care about this information. Like, I don't want to give you any information right now. I just want to go talk to my kid and be with my kid right now. But I had to do it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And then it was a whirlwind. And then we finally get into a room, and the nurses are there. You know, they're checking all of his vitals, and he's mostly stable as far as vitals go. Emotionally, obviously, he wasn't. He was very drunk too, so it was just all over the place. He was still crying profusely. So part of their testing, their like lab testing and the levels of potassium and alcohol and just all the things, they tested for COVID. And for whatever reason, he was positive. He had no symptoms. He had no signs. Later, which I'll share with you later, it was a huge gift. It was a huge blessing in disguise. So he's positive for COVID. The doctor comes in a couple hours later with like all the results and stuff. And he says, look, I've been doing this for many, many years. And I've been dealing with teens who really, truly want to die. And your child is not one of them. He didn't even exceed the daily dose of everything that he took. This is just simply a cry for help. And because he was positive for COVID, the doctor said, technically, the protocol is before they are sent to like the mental health facility, you have to be COVID negative for 5 days, hence the gift. So we go upstairs. I'm kind of skipping a little bit, just kind of giving you that 30,000 foot view. And then we can you guys can hone in on whatever you want. So there was so many moments where I had to make decisions. You know, do I keep him here? Do I take him out? Do I go upstairs? Do I put him in that mental health care facility? Like, what do I do? So in like the chaos of it all, I just remember leaving the room a couple times. So we also had a sitter, because whenever there's a suicide attempt, you have to have 24-hour watch. So I would escape little moments, and I would just, you know, put my hand on my heart and just kind of close my eyes for a second and just really tune in. And ultimately, I was thankful I didn't have to make that decision right away for the mental health facility. So fast forward. So we get admitted, we go upstairs, he's given a room. This is the next morning. So he's definitely sobering up, and he's awake, and he's aware, and he has recollection of what happened. There's a sitter still in our room. There's no, you know, bathroom shower curtain. There's no anything. It's the room is completely bare. Like, I wasn't even allowed to have my personal belongings out. I had to keep them in a locked case. He wasn't allowed to eat with like utensils. Like, they had to monitor him eating. Like, it was a whole big thing. As he came around, him and I had conversations, obviously, as much as we could, but he was very much still digesting also for himself what had happened. And him and I had some conversations, just like, he's like, why do I have to stay here? And obviously I explained, like, there's a severity of what happened, and these are the consequences. At that point, I still didn't know the capacity at which he was really struggling. Obviously, you know, even though he was in my house, I also learned that he was self-harming that I didn't know. So that was like a whole other layer. Fast forward, the next day, we had a full-on, of course, when you're on, I think it was like the 5th floor of the children's hospital, there was a full psychological evaluation, and I wasn't a part of it. The doctor basically had me leave the room, and the psychiatrist came and talked to Evan. and asked him a zillion different questions and basically came up with this analysis. Later that afternoon, the doctor came back in and said he has general anxiety disorder, which I had already known since 2019. When he was in middle school, he was diagnosed with that. And we had been working with a therapist to help him get out of his anxiety. And so that was it. And then the follow-up statement to her, the doctor, was he needs to be on Prozac. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's talk. I want to talk to my son. So she left the room. I'm talking to Evan, and he's like, I'm not taking medication. Like, I don't need medication. And I'm not even kidding, before I even ended that conversation with him, the nurse came in with the Prozac pill and said, here. And I said, no, Evan doesn't want to take it. And he's 17. Yes, he's a minor, but he's 17. We're not talking about a 9-year-old. And he doesn't want to take it. They kind of balked a little bit. He didn't take it. And then again, they tried in the evening to give him another one. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not taking that. So that was one day. And then during the days, Evan and I were just having deeper conversations about what led to this.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically describes it as he didn't know who he was. And he was trying to fit into this mold. And he was trying to be perfect. And he was trying to be the best son. And he was trying to be the greatest student. And he was trying to please all of his friends. That was coupled with, which he hadn't come out yet, but I've known since Evan was 2 years old that he was gay or bi or something. It was very obvious. It wasn't like this is a new fad and I want to try this. I've known since he was 2. So I knew that he was having a severe identity crisis. And like I said, he hadn't come out yet, but intuitively as a mom, I knew that was also a part of it. So, but a lot of it he just described as trying to fit into this box. He had a friend that he was talking to. I later found out that it was a guy that he was dating, and they kind of broken up and they separated. And that's what ignited the cry for help.
Got his poor little heart broken.
And he probably didn't feel he had anybody to talk to about it because he's not out yet.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that alongside what was happening in the hospital room was, so like I said, we had to have these sitters 24/7. And this one sitter came in and she barges in the room and she's like, all right, Evan, if you behave, things are going to go good. If you don't behave, things aren't going to go good. And I'm like, excuse me? And I said, no, Evan's very collaborative. Like, he was talking with the doctors. He was asking questions. Like, he was fully engaged. My kid is also, to add this to this, my kid is also wise well beyond his years. And he just always has been. So he's been really good at communicating. And I said, no, he's collaborative. He's engaged, all the things. And she's like, yeah, well, when you have personality disorders, things can change on a dime. And that to me was just a stark, in your face, I'm putting you into this box. I don't care who you are as an individual. I'm placing you here because you're on this floor. I'm placing you in this box. And the mama bear in me.
I'm just going to break in here real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to these sitters, I think that they're the same group of people that sit with people at the mental health facility, or if it's a fall risk in the hospital or something. So who in the fuck, excuse my language, does this person think they are to A, give your kid a diagnosis of a personality disorder, and B, put their 2 cents in? Sit in the chair, watch the patient, do your minimum wage job.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, had to say that.
Right? I couldn't agree more. Exactly. I was so mad. And then that same nurse, it was a nurse, and the same nurse came in at one point, she switched and then she came back, and it was time for dinner. And up until that point, the nurses got to know Evan enough to where they know he's not going to swallow a plastic spoon to try to kill himself. So they let him have like plastic spoons and plastic forks. And I think one nurse even let him have like a plastic knife. When she came in, or dinner was delivered and there was the utensils, she was like, oh yeah, no, we need to take this off right away. And I forgot what it was. I think it was a sandwich and pasta or something. There was like a side where he needed to eat with utensils, and she made him eat with his hands. And so this is all happening. Now it's been, gosh, probably 4-5 days, and we're approaching that time where he's about to get retested for COVID. And everything in me is just screaming, like, this doesn't feel right. This does not feel right. And then the girl next door, she had some severe mental health problems. And I guess she was a frequent flyer. She was there often. And she was screaming rape all night long for like the last 4 nights.
Mm.
And that was really starting to mess with Evan's head. And I just saw my kid's mood and his being just get darker. Like when he came around, that first day, he started to see things clearly. And you could tell there was almost like this lifting period, this like, okay, that happened. And now I'm going to move up from here. That was the first day. And then every day after, with everything happening in the hospital, it just kept getting darker and darker and darker and darker. And the first couple of days, like I said, Evan was like, I want to get out of here. And I'm like, no, this is the process. Like, this is part of what we need to do, blah, blah, blah. But then inside, my intuition started to kind of, whisper and then get louder and louder and louder. So after the whole meal ordeal with the nurse, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I stayed up the entire night I think I slept like a couple hours, but I was researching not only my patient rights, obviously, because this is next level, suicide attempt is. So I knew, especially because he's a minor. So I knew that there was going to be some issues. But then also I'm like, I basically created an outpatient plan because I'm like, I want to make sure that Evan gets a support. This isn't just, let me rip my kid out of the hospital and then, oh, now everything's fine. And he said it was just because he was people pleasing. No, something drove him to the depths of despair where even if he didn't necessarily want to die, he wanted the pain to end. So I created this outpatient plan and just did a ton of research. I found a therapist who specializes in suicide ideology, who specializes in teen self-harming, who specialized in LGBTQ, because I was in hopes of like, hopefully maybe she can pull it out of him that it's safe to come out. It's safe. Like, your family loves you. There's no judgment here. I was also talking to his integrative medicine doctor, who actually told me that there was some early signs of being tested positive for COVID and increased suicide ideologies, especially in the age bracket of where Evan was. I think she said it was between like 15 and 20. New studies were starting to come out that there was some kind of connection there.
Interesting. Because he was positive for COVID, I'm curious, did the hospital also try to treat that too, even though he wasn't showing symptoms? Did they give you any crap about that?
Nope. Thankfully, they just said, okay, he hasn't had any symptoms. We kind of traced it back and we realized that he was sick like 2 or 3 weeks earlier. He had like a low-grade fever. It wasn't anything crazy. It was just like, just sick. He just had a cold, the sniffles. He had a little bit of a low-grade fever.
Yeah.
So we think that maybe it was just the residual of that. But no, they didn't. Thankfully, I didn't have to fight them on that layer. So I stayed up all night creating a plan, emotional, physical, all of the things for my kid. And the next morning, the doctor came in again, tried to give him Prozac. And we're like, yeah, no, we're good. Oh, and also we're not going to just not take your Prozac, but I think I said something like, I'd like to start the discharge process. And they were kind of like, what? The nurse she gave me more crap than the doctor did. She was like, are you sure you want to do that? And I said, yes.
Well, how long were they expecting to keep him?
So their plan was to keep him 5 to 7 days, depending on when he tested negative, and then transfer him into an inpatient mental health care facility.
Okay.
So that's why COVID was such a gift, because I didn't have the wherewithal and I didn't have the knowledge. After he met with the psychiatrist, I didn't know what we were dealing with here. So I had more information that I could gather, plus talking to his integrative medicine doctor, plus talking to his therapist that he was working with for his anxiety. So I had this team behind me that I felt empowered to and feel confident. Like, I feel safe enough to withdraw and discharge my kid from the hospital and move forward. So the doctor came in and she said, I respect your decision. And I shared with her my plan. I said, here's what I'm doing. Boom, 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 boom. And she said, that's fine. She said, I respect your decision. And also, Child Protective Services are going to have to be called.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's fine. We ran the hell out of there. Basically, everyone was so happy to get out of there. The next day, I got a call from Child Protective Services asking for an investigation. I was like, absolutely, come on over. So she did. She met with the four of us basically separately, and the case was closed within, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks. So that was good.
Yeah.
What was really beautiful about the timing of all of this was that probably 2 or 3 months prior to this, we had planned to go to a ranch, to ranch sit basically, for someone who had like hundreds of acres, animals, chickens, like all the things. And so we got out of the hospital, and I think it was like 2 days later, we were supposed to leave. And at first I'm like, I don't know, I feel like we should cancel. And then when we got out, I'm like, this is so perfect, because we had limited service. It was basically, just me, Josh, and Evan out in the middle of nowhere. It was really, really, really powerful, because we just got to have so many beautiful conversations. And Evan just continued to sink deeper into himself and kind of peel back the layers of what had led to all of that. And so we started sharing more, and it was just a really beautiful container that we held him in.
And I imagine you guys are probably like off grid a little bit, maybe too, and away from society, away from the phones and all the distractions. And that, that alone can be really healing. But then out in nature too.
Exactly.
And then being with the animals, I'm sure that was so therapeutic for him.
It was really, really, really healing for all of us. It was really powerful. So yeah, that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of what we went through.
And so after you guys got done sitting for the ranch, what was life like for him and for you?
During the whole ordeal, for me, I felt very grounded and anchored. I remember telling Josh, like, I feel like this peace is coming from God, because I have no reason to feel peaceful as I do. Like, on some level, I felt like I should be like curled up in the fetal position, sucking my thumb. But then on the other level, I'm just like, there was just this deep peace. And there was also this deep knowing that he has to go through this. And I got this visualization when I was in the hospital room with him one night, and the nurse was at her desk, Evan was sleeping, and I was just kind of just being still. I just got this visualization of this crumbling down. This version of Evan had to come crumbling down, because it's going to be built back up. And I really felt a lot of peace around that. I just felt this knowing around that, even though it looked super messy. So during the whole ordeal, I felt very peaceful and calm and all the things. Supporting my kid, loving my kid, showing up, not being frazzled, taking those moments of stillness just to place my hands on my heart and take a deep breath sometimes. And then after we got back from the ranch, that's when I think reality really hit for me. For Evan too, but in a different kind of way for Evan. I could feel this sort of liberation from him. I felt like he was sort of carrying around this backpack, because this had been months. I knew something was off. I knew that he was going through something. Talking to a teenager is so freaking hard. So I would sit on his bed and I'd be like, what's going on, dude? Like, you seem off. Like, are you sad? Are you depressed? Are you okay? Mom, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine, is basically what I got. when we got back from the ranch, I sort of felt that liberation from him. I felt like he just like set down the backpack and he didn't pick it up again. For me, I felt like I picked up the backpack. I felt like it was like shit. And that's when everything came flooding in. My dad actually died of suicide when I was 15 years old. And that completely turned my world inside out and upside down.
I bet.
From the age of 15 until the age of like upper 20s. And so all of that came up. And what I mean by that is not just the pain of my dad's suicide, but from the 15-year-old perspective, I remember feeling like, God, I should have known. I should have known my dad was struggling. Like, why didn't I see my dad was struggling? And so I tied that to Evan. Why didn't I see him? How did I not see this coming? And then, of course, all of the mom guilt just was like piled on to the stuff with my dad's suicide.
Isn't it interesting how we're nodding? I'm sorry, I just noticed that we're both nodding like we have completely different stories, but just that being able to relate in those same exact feelings is just
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a powerful moment to me.
No, it's true. It's just all of it was just like bubbling up.
Yeah.
Especially the guilt. I had so much guilt. Like I didn't protect my child.
Yeah.
Is basically the sentiment that I couldn't protect my child. Like I wanted to protect my kid and I failed him is the story that I bought into.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, really, really heavy. My stuff with my dad, I had already done a lot of healing, so much healing around that. And so there was also that layer of like, fuck, man, like I thought I was done with this. Like,
Right.
Again, like,
yeah,
this story is so old. Like I've healed that. I've forgiven. I've let go of all those, the little girl in me all the stories. So then there was the layer of shame. Like, I should be above this. Like, I can't believe this is still an issue, blah, 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 blah. So I sort of remember feeling like I've been thankful to not ever experience depression and like struggle with anxiety and depression. But man, there definitely is a thing called situational depression because I think I was for sure in it.
Yes.
I just felt like I didn't want to get out of bed. Like I remember journaling and I remember writing and I was starting to journal and the ink in my pen ran out and I just started bawling. Like it was too much. It was like all those little things were just too much. I felt like I was this fragile little human being. And if somebody went flick, I'd just topple over. I was that fragile.
The tiny inconveniences of life really can throw one over the edge.
Yeah.
When you're least expecting it.
Yeah. And then there was the layer of also holding Evan still, because even though we were out of the hospital, we were back from the ranch, like our journey was just beginning.
Right.
It was certainly not over. And then life didn't stop. So I had to find him like make appointments with the new therapist. And there was a couple times too where I remember I'd walk by his room, and this was like, a month or two later, I'd walk by his room and I'd hear him crying. And the PTSD in me was like, is he okay? Is he going to try again? Like, what's happening? I remember feeling very activated. Everything was just activated. Like I was just like on edge about everything.
I hate using the word, but triggered comes to mind.
I know, right? It's so overabused, but it was.
And like, how do you deal with what now you're processing and you're, crying because your pen ran out of ink? And then like, are you allowing him to see that you're also struggling?
I definitely was. Because I felt like it was important for him to know that I'm human and I'm a mom and I don't have it all figured out either, but we're going to figure this out together. And you're allowed to feel the way that you want to feel. And that's where I think the healing came in for me also, in sitting with my feelings and really sitting with my feelings and giving myself permission to sit with my feelings as much as I was telling Evan to be okay with his feelings and sit with his feelings. So it was a good reflection of pointing the finger at him to me, like, I need to do that. Because at the time too, like there were so many layers to this. And I think that's why it shook me to my very core. Behind the scenes, up until that point, I'm an author. I was speaking a lot about manifesting. I was writing another book. I was teaching classes. I was coaching clients. I was doing all the things. And what I realized was I started to recognize like manifesting is great. Affirmations are great. And also, they can lead to a spiritual bypass. They can lead to that emotional bypass. And that's where I realized for me, I've always been very positive. I just have a positive mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in looking back and what really that whole situation brought to light is sometimes there's no place for fucking affirmations. Like, feel your feelings.
Right.
It's okay that you're in despair and you don't have to, what's that saying? You paint a pig with lipstick or something. Like, this is a shitty situation and it sucks and it's hard and it's gut wrenching. So I don't have to be fucking positive right now. And that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. It was a really beautiful gift though, because I also felt there's a tie. There's a tie between my personal life and my professional life. And so I practice what I preach. Through and through, I have just adopted this idea that I have to be my own best client, no matter how hard. And so what I had been starting to play with, because these ideas about like manifesting and affirmations and all the jazz, I was starting to feel this sort of like backing away from those things before Evan's attempt. But I didn't do anything about it because that's my identity. And I'm not going to change my profession. Like, no. Well, a funny thing happens, as I'm sure you ladies can relate to, that when there's a crisis, everything comes crumbling down. And I felt like now I have to look at it. And now I'm willing to look at it. And what I had noticed and recognized was that I was playing with the idea and starting to embody and integrate the idea. It was a radical one, but what if peace didn't have anything to do with the external world? What if peace comes from the inside out? Okay, what does that mean? Well, what if the reason why we suffer is because we're making meaning out of the situations that's happening? And when I looked at that, I'm like, okay, there is definitely truth to that, because in my pits of despair, especially around Evan's attempt, I was making it mean something. I was making it mean that I was not a good mom. I was making it mean that I didn't love or support my kid enough and I didn't see him. I was making it mean that I was responsible for his happiness, his peace, his joy. And so all of these things were bubbling up to the surface again. So I also felt there was this holding for Evan and then holding myself as I'm shifting and transforming not just my personal life, but my business. And like I felt like misaligned now. Like I have this business, I still have clients, teaching manifestation, but I'm feeling like this sort of backing away. So it was a really interesting time. And that was the catalyst of not just my transformation, but in my business. I basically dropped that whole business like a hot potato. Not that I don't think that there's room for manifesting and room for affirmations. What I'm so incredibly passionate about is that idea of peace from the inside out and not needing things to be perfect in order to feel peaceful. I feel like we give away our power so much in the external world. And life happens. Kids have suicide attempts. People get into car accidents. Kids get diagnosed with cancer and die. Life happens. And instead of trying to gloss it over with a bunch of positivity and new agey stuff, not that I'm against it, but like there has to be this other conversation that peace is not outside of us. It really comes from the inside. So that was huge. Like I said, I completely dropped that business. I transformed everything that I live and teach now. I love my work. I always have loved my work, but it's always changing as I grow and change too. So as far as Evan went, it was so beautiful watching him kind of emerge. So that happened in March of 2022. He came out in October of 2022. I remember when he called me and he said, Mom, he was in Florida actually. We had already moved to Texas. Obviously, this happened in Texas. But he had gone back to Florida to be with his friends for Halloween. Evan's a huge, Halloween lover. That's like his Christmas. And so he went back to be with his friends and he called me. And he told me like a week before, I have something really big to tell you. And I'm going to do it when I'm with my friends in Florida. And I was like, duh. I knew exactly what it was. He called and he said, I have to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. And he said, so I'm bisexual. And I was like, I figured. And I love you. And it's all good. And he's like, really? He's like, I know a big part of me felt like it was going to be fine. He's like, but I just didn't know. And he's like, all my friends were telling me, like, just do it. Your mom's and your family's amazing and blah, blah. So once he came out, there was that other layer of like being really anchored into who he is and accepting himself. There was one moment, because we're continuing these conversations, throughout his therapy. I'm talking to his therapist. He's talking to his therapist once or twice a week. And so we're fleshing some things out as, I'm driving him to work and as we're just doing life. And one of the things that he told me, this crushed me. He told me that he put a sheet over his bathroom mirror so that he didn't have to look at himself.
Oh, man.
No.
And, I think being a teenager is hard in of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that alone is awful.
Yeah, when you don't fit into the boxes, it makes it even harder. So it was sad. But on the flip side of that, I think it was August, September. So again, this happened in March. So this was like 4 or 5 months down the road. And I just picked him up from work and out of the blue, he's like, Mom, can I tell you something? And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I am just so happy. And I was like, really? Why? Is there anything that you can tie it to? And he's like, just because. And I'm like, that for me was just an affirmation of the work that he's doing. Number one, like he was doing the work on his own. I was kind of just taking a supporting role, because again, like he was 17. We're not talking about a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. So I had to kind of be the co-pilot in many ways. And now, he's in his 20s. He's 20. He'll be 21 at the end of the year. And he's just become this beautiful little butterfly of a human and he contributes it to that. He says, where he stands now is like, I am so glad that happened. I'm so glad that I completely lost myself so much to where, I thought hurting myself was a good idea. He's like, because I wouldn't be where I am today. So he's done a lot of work. I'm really proud of my kid.
Is he still going to therapy?
He does sometimes. The anxiety completely went away after that. And I think that was tied to also not being able to be yourself in the world. I think that creates anxiety. So I think once he came out, all of that just kind of dropped away. Every once in a while, he's in the dating world. So sometimes, he'll reach out to his therapist and he'll book a session or something. But for the most part, he's just on his own little journey. And yeah, it was definitely the catalyst for him and myself as a mom, just going through that. That was pretty intense.
Yeah, that is intense.
Now, how
really intense.
Yeah, it's very intense. How were your relationships with others during that time, like with Josh and, with like the rest of your family? Did you find that, did they kind of give you space to see that you were processing things, or were they kind of a part of, supporting Evan with you?
So Josh was an integral part, my husband. He was a huge part because he was in the everyday with me, and so he was a really good sounding board, supporter, especially when I felt on those days where I didn't want to get out of bed and I was beating myself up and just all of that was kind of being fleshed out. He would just remind me of who I was and the type of mom I was, and he was really a big part of it. I also had a dear friend, Katie, who I call my soul sister, where we have like these deeper, like soulful conversations. It was a really good space. We Marco Polo a lot, just to kind of flesh out what was coming up for me, all of these like triggers that were happening, also what I was doing to heal. And just, it was a good space. My mom was there too. But all in all, I felt like these support systems were great. But at the same time, I came inside. I wanted to be led and guided by spirit. I wanted to get out of my ego and what the personality part of Jody thinks is a good idea, and really tune in to the guidance, from God, and really tune in. So I did a lot of just stillness. And even though I talked to the people, my family and friends, and they were supportive, I remember feeling like independent from their opinions, because everybody had an opinion of what the path should look like. And I took that in, but then just tuned in here. So yeah, they were a big part of it.
So for those that don't know, Evan has a different father. It's not Josh.
Yeah.
Is Evan's father in his life at all?
Yeah. He's in Florida.
Did he know about what happened?
Oh, yeah. And that was another piece of it, actually. Remember I told you about the awful nurse who wouldn't let him eat with utensils? That same night, his dad had called me and he was asking for an update, and him and I were just kind of going back and forth. And then Evan heard me and his dad talking, and he said, "Can I talk to my dad? Or can I talk?" And I started to hand the phone over to Evan, and she's like, "Nope, nope, nope, no phone calls." And I was like, this is his father, and he needs a support system. He needs to know that he's loved. And like, why? And she's like, "Well, I need to run it by the charge nurse and blah, blah." So long story short, I ended up talking to him until they figured it out. And then they were like, "Okay, that's fine. You can talk to your dad." I'm like,
Whatever.
Give me a break. Dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was a big part of it. He was just as devastated, especially being, in Florida, and we were here in Texas. So he felt helpless.
Like if that were my husband on the other end of the phone, I think the whole floor would hear him freaking out.
Yeah, he did start to raise his voice a little, and I was like, "Okay, listen, we don't need to add another layer of like chaos and all of that."
Right.
And he had known too that like I was already contemplating and thinking about taking him out and discharging him. So that just gave us both like an extra little push. So yeah.
Right.
Little fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Well, that's good that you guys are both on the same page with that.
Oh yeah.
That understanding and that plan.
Yeah.
And that he trusted you enough to kind of create the plan and then execute the plan.
Yeah. And that was a big piece of it, actually, because even though I felt confident and I felt like it was my intuition guiding me to discharge him, the people around me who knew us all were basically saying the same thing. "You're doing the right thing, Jody. You're doing the right thing for your child. Like, Evan doesn't belong there. Yes, he needs further help, but he doesn't belong where he is, and he certainly does not belong in an inpatient mental health facility."
Those mental health facilities are great for people who desperately there's no other option. This is like severe.
Exactly.
That don't maybe have a support system that's going to, follow up and take them to the appointments they need or the specialist they need to be with. But they're not great for, helping your mental health while you're there, really, the day to day. Maybe you see the psychiatrist, maybe they give you all the meds and keep you kind of baseline zombie while you're there, but everybody's screaming. I mean, you're in the hospital and the girl's screaming rape next door for days on end. That's not good for somebody's mental health. And that's a lot of what mental health facilities are going to do.
Exactly. Exactly. And Evan was really nervous about that. He said, "Mom, I don't want to go and just them give me drugs.
Mm-mm.
Like, I want to feel what I'm feeling and use it as a way to heal. Like, I want this to come up and, see it as like, okay, I've got some shit that I need to heal that's been subconsciously there. And now I have to look at it," is where he was coming from. I don't want to mask it with drugs. And I felt exactly the same way. So that was just a huge reluctancy in him staying in the
I love that he saw it that way, despite
Mhm.
that his attempt was all about masking. His attempt was about masking all the feelings, and yet he was able to come out of it and say, no, I don't want the drugs. Like, that's huge.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. It was a big deal. It was the beginning of our healing.
I'm really curious about the integrative, your integrative doctor. What did they have you do?
She wanted to check his gut health
Mm-hmm.
because obviously the gut is everything. It's our brain. After we got out, she evaluated him and did some testing, and his gut biome needed to be healed. So we put him on a bunch of different holistic homeopathic remedies to help, obviously tons and tons of probiotics, but even beyond that, it was a gut focus more than anything else.
So did he have to change his diet too?
Yep. He changed his diet. He's always been a pretty good eater, but obviously eliminating a lot of sugar, processed like breads and things like that. It didn't stick forever, but initially while we were, in the beginning phases, I felt like it definitely helped. And that was part of our plan too, is to address, the physical part, and learn more about what she had said about the COVID thing and that connection.
I'm interested in finding studies about that because that's something I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, she sent me one of the studies and I don't remember much of it. I just remember being like, wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like, who would have thought?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was healing from the inside out.
I was going to backtrack in your life a little bit. I'm curious to see, what did your mom do for you as a teenager? After what happened with your dad, how did your mom help you heal? You said you had a long time of healing and a lot of years of working that out. So I was just curious if you kind of got the roadmap from your mom on how to deal with this kind of thing, or if you're going based off of just instinct with your son.
So for me, the initial days of my dad's suicide, it was definitely get into therapy. And she's a retired nurse, but she was in nursing. And so she was very plugged into the healthcare system. And so she knew of a really good child therapist that could help us. I was really, 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 really close to my dad. I mean, he was literally like my best friend. So it rocked my world
Yeah.
to
Really?
no end. So I started with him from 15 to 16. Actually, probably, so we moved from Massachusetts to Florida. So this happened, I lost my dad in 9th grade. And then my junior year going into my senior, my mom thought it was a good idea to move from Massachusetts to Florida. So I moved my senior year and I was still really struggling around my dad's suicide. And so she actually hired a life coach, which is so crazy because full circle, that came exactly what I did in 2010. And the life coach really helped me understand, not just process the abandonment, the very clear abandonment issues that I was having. And that was completely being projected onto my relationships and the guys I was dating, separate from my husband, Josh, but all the guys before that. And so we were working through, the very real stuff that comes with being a suicide survivor. What I had recognized, and a big part of my pain, was because I had become exactly that. I was just surviving. I was literally just surviving through life. I was not thriving. I was a single mom for much of the years, so I was just burnt out and tired. And so a lot of my healing around my dad tied into just everyday life. And I was suffering to the point where I'm like, I want something better for my life. And as much as I tried to change the circumstances in my life, whether it was get a new job or find a new boyfriend or move to a different city or what have you, I still had the same suffering. So when it came to Evan, I think I had gotten to the point enough to where I was able to recognize the stories that I was telling myself, and that's where the pain was coming from. Again, it goes back to the meanings that we make of things. So you can have two people in the same grocery store line. One person is like, this sucks. This is awful. I hate this. They shouldn't be moving this slow. My life is miserable. I'm going to be late. I hate my life, blah, blah. You can have another person who's like, that's okay. I can't control it. So I'm just going to let go and I'm just going to pause and be in the moment and have radical acceptance for this moment. And that was me. I was initially the first person and then I became the second person just because out of that pain, just out of that suffering, I realized that a lot of my own suffering came from the complexities and the stories and the belief systems and the thoughts that I was having about life, about these situations that were causing me and wreaking havoc in my mind. So by the time that Evan's attempt came, I had fleshed through all of that stuff simply just out of my own suffering and finding a path to liberate my own suffering. Like, okay, surely there has to be a way here. I've tried therapy. I've tried coaching. I've tried manifesting. I've tried affirmations. I've had the money. I've had the health. I've had X, Y's, and Z's, and I'm still not happy. So with Evan, that's the wisdom that I imparted on him is, look, buddy, breakups are going to happen. Life is going to fucking kick you in the nuts while you're already down. It's just, life is going to life. And it's going to happen. This isn't going to be your first heartbreak. This isn't going to be your first sort of identity crisis. So let's walk through the fire together.
Yeah, wait till you're pushing 40, man.
Right.
I was going to talk about something that you had said about, the two different people in the line having two different experiences in the line. Something that I notice about myself is I am those two different people, like all the time. Some days I'm just like, la da 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 da, the traffic's, wow, so much traffic, no big deal. And other days I'm like, fuck you, get out of the way. And I like don't know how to like choose a lane. Which one am I going to be all the time?
Yeah, I blame it on my hormones. Half the week I'm one of those, or half the month I'm one of those. The other half of the month I'm the opposite.
Yeah. That was part of my healing too, is like getting my hormones, working with an integrative doctor to take the holistic approach.
Okay, I want to go down this rabbit hole real quick. I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to be going through perimenopause at the same time my daughter's going through getting her period. This is going to be fucking hell. Like, how do I survive this? Help.
All the tools.
SOS, white flag.
Send help right now.
I love margaritas, but I don't want to turn to alcohol because, I can't handle life. I can't handle my kids.
Yeah, that's a big thing, actually, that you speak on that, because a lot of my clients come to me because of that, because there's a thing in the mom world called let's just drink and have it be kind of the norm, like bringing little sippy cups to soccer games and baseball games, and just because life is overwhelming.
Well, not only that, but, when Stephanie was saying like, send help, the hashtag send wine, everybody, that's like the thing. Everybody's like, oh, help. Oh my gosh, send wine.
Yeah. I went through that when my kids were like young, littler. There was like a big wine culture with motherhood. And, thankfully I never got like real addicted to it or anything like that. But
yeah, I cut drinking out 5 years ago.
Nice.
I don't remember. 2019. Yeah.
Yeah. Going on 6 years.
Just actively not drinking.
That's awesome.
I don't even think about it really anymore.
It makes a big difference. I remember feeling the same sentiment that Evan expressed. Like, I want to feel this. I don't just want to bypass all the stuff. And I think that's the hard part. When life does kick us in the nuts, I think it is easier for most people just to, drink or smoke or overeat or whatever the vice is.
Yep.
It's just a Band-Aid, though. It prolongs the healing. And kind of going back to what we were just talking about, it's like with the healing process, it just prolongs it. And like, I think that's what Evan was speaking to, that whether he knew or not, he was articulating it, but he didn't want the process to be prolonged. He really wanted to run through the fire of healing to get through it, to be on the quote unquote other side.
That speaks to his maturity level too.
And his wisdom.
Right. Like you were saying, he's been wise beyond his years since he was really little. I mean, that's massive for a 17-year-old. Like,
yeah. I
kudos to you, man, for raising such a smart boy.
Yeah.
Oh, I think a lot of it was homeschooled. So I've homeschooled him a lot. I really attribute it to he didn't have that programming. And so he's able to critically think for himself.
Props to you, man. I can't homeschool with my kids. I can't handle it. I had a taste of that when COVID happened.
Yeah. We did it 5th grade and then we did it all of high school. It's definitely next level.
Yeah.
I think middle school years are the years that are really important to maybe homeschool. I mean, she's fortunate that her kids are in a private school, so it's probably a little more contained as far as the school conversations and the things that they're learning and whatever. But, we did a
Right.
lot of homeschool. Just homeschool's always an option for my kids. They've been in and out of the public school. They had a little bit of private school. Like, it's just always an option. If they're feeling some type of way, that's fine. We'll homeschool this year. No big deal.
Yeah, I love that.
And every time they do come back home, the next year that they do decide to go back to school, they're always farther ahead than everybody else. And it's like,
Yep.
I'm not even doing anything that
Right.
extra, great. It's just so much time is wasted. It's such a time suck at school between classes and the drama that the teacher has to tell the kids to all be quiet. And it's just, there's such a time suck. And homeschool is really cool if you can do it.
Like you can get done a school day in like 2 or 3 hours at home, what you would get done
Exactly.
at a 7-hour school day.
Exactly. And then they can kind of.
Because you X out all the fluff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. My kids were like, Mom, yesterday, they're like, Mom, they said 28 days or something till they're out of school. And I was like, boo. Boo.
I get that.
I love you, but boo.
I get that too, though, because my kids are now all in school. And my oldest is in 9th grade currently. And he loves high school.
Oh, that's good.
They give you so much more autonomy compared to middle school and elementary. If I drop him off, there's no teachers hanging out, letting the kids out of the car. Like, you get out of the car and you walk. But he just feels so much more, I don't know. He just has a little bit more freedom, and it's really cool for him. He really, really likes it. And he actually has friends. He never had friends before. So he's really enjoying school.
Oh, that's awesome. That's huge.
My first I could homeschool. He could thrive. He loves academics. He's very smart. He's very independent when it comes to his work. My daughter is completely the opposite.
Different. Yeah.
I could not homeschool her. She needs the structure, and she needs somebody that she can't argue with. Like I always got surprised ever since she was really little and she started preschool. This school is private. It goes from pre-K all the way to high school, all the way through 12th grade. And I thought for sure when she was going to go to preschool, we were going to get notes home all the time about her behavior. Like she was going to struggle. They were going to kick us out. Nope. She's a freaking angel. She's perfect at school. She comes home and just, everything goes to shit.
Because she listens to them.
Yeah. So I could not homeschool her. And my youngest is he's kind of a mixture of both, but he needs the structure too. Props to homeschool moms, man. But if I had the one, I could do it, but not with the three. I just know.
Yeah. Yeah.
My personality,
Yep. Know your boundaries.
I know my boundaries. Yep. And I will never talk smack about homeschool ever.
Yep.
I know we totally went on a total bunny trail there, bro. I love it.
I love it. Zigzag all over the place. Where do we want to go next?
If you don't mind, I know it's tough, but can we talk a little bit about what happened with your dad?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
It's not tough. Where I stand today, it's not tough at all.
Do you know his motive? And did he leave anything? Did he leave a note, or how did he do it? Like what was going on with him? What was he struggling with?
I didn't find out until his suicide that he had struggled with bipolar. In the 80s, the whole 80s, 90s, he really struggled. I didn't know any different. My dad was just awesome and loving and amazing and happy and outgoing. And I always felt like my dad really saw me. All I knew was my dad was amazing. He was loving, he was kind, he was outgoing, he was the mayor in so many ways. Like he knew this person, he knew that person. He was very outgoing. I didn't know, though, he struggled with bipolar and severe depression. Like my mom told me later that there were Christmases that he couldn't get out of bed. So I didn't know that as a kid. So then when I was 14, they got separated. They were married for 18 years. And basically my mom just really just kind of had enough of the ups and the downs and the severe highs and the severe lows. And he didn't want to take medications because he didn't like the way it made him feel. He wasn't able to feel those highs. So it was constantly a battle with them. So they got separated, and I thought like that was the end of the world. Like I thought, okay, my life is like awful. I didn't know that basically 2 years later, a week before the divorce was going to be final, is when he killed himself. He hung himself. And it was crazy because he did it on a Wednesday. I called him on Thursday. He didn't answer the phone, obviously. And then they found him on Friday. So when my mom told my brother and I was getting ready for gymnastics, and she's like, come downstairs. And I kept blowing her off. Same thing with my brother. And I remember turning the corner where our dining room was in the kitchen to where she was standing, and just the look on her face. I knew something was awful. And she said, all she said was, it's your dad. And then what came flying out of my mouth was, he killed himself, didn't he? And she was like, he did. And I remember when she confirmed it, it was almost like she was speaking Spanish, like it wasn't computing. Like, I'm like, no, that just came flying out of my mouth. I really wasn't expecting for that answer to be yes. And then I said, well, I don't want to know how he did it. And then she told me later, because I asked, I couldn't help but to ask. And then an hour later, I left for gymnastics. Again, like, I don't think it registered. And then during gymnastics, my friend, her parents came and picked us up. We were carpooling, and she came and picked me up. And I was doing like the routine, and my friend Kate was like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I just found out that my dad committed suicide. And she was like, what? I mean, she was like best friends. That'd be like if you guys, parents, like it was like my best friend. So she was like, what? And then I didn't cry. I still didn't cry until later that night. One of my other best friends came over, and like as soon as I saw her, I was just like, blah. And then I cried myself to sleep every night for the next 5 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Literally cried myself to sleep every night for the next 5 years, holding his sweatshirt, not knowing how I was going to get through life, just not knowing. Like, I hated my mom. I hated my mom. She didn't know it, but I 1000% blamed her. I was like, if you didn't leave him, he would still be here today.
Were you internally blaming your mom?
100%. But it's funny because we talked about it later. She didn't know. So I was thankful I didn't like make her feel shitty for it.
Yeah.
But on the inside, I was like, it's your fault. Like, it's clear as day. He did it a week before the divorce was going to be final. And in those 2 years, my dad and I were very close. I mean, every other weekend, sometimes every weekend. I just wanted to be with my dad. So we would just hang out. I'd stay at his house. We'd go to the movies. We'd go to parks, bring my friends over there, because obviously I'm a 15-year-old girl and friends are everything, but my dad was everything. So we were having conversations, and I knew how much pain he was in from not being with my mom because they were separated, because he looked at it as their soulmates. So they can't be divorced. So he was devastated, which is why he did it a week before the divorce was going to be final.
And that's why you knew, right? Like, that's where that instinctual, like, your mom said something about your dad and you were like, he killed himself, didn't he? Like,
Yep.
That's crazy that it came out of your mouth.
Yeah, it was. I surprised myself. It was crazy. So he didn't leave a note, which added to the layer of like abandonment, not having any answers. I felt like I had zero closure. But what's funny is that 5 years later, so when I turned 20, my mom gave me his journals. He had 5 journals that he was writing in during that 2-year period where they were separated. She read through them all, and then she talked to my therapist and said, I really want to give these to Jody. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, she's able to handle it now. So I had his journals, but I still, even though I had them, I was so fixated on that stereotypical suicide note, and I didn't have it. I wanted it to be, Dear Jody, I love you so much. This wasn't about you, type of letter. And the fact that I didn't have that, I still had no closure. So the pain was even worse because I'm like, not only did he leave me, but he left me without all of these answers. And then when I was 33, so this was 19 years later, that's when I had a true healing. So long story short, my mom and I got into it on the phone about this and that. It's actually about my stepdad. And I hung up the phone with her. I was so aggravated. And what I always did was I always grabbed my dad's journals anytime I wanted to feel him and like to have his love. And so that was always my comfort. Anytime I broke up with a boyfriend or something was going awry in my life, like I just leaned on his journals just for comfort, for me to feel like, okay, my dad's here. And so I did that. And I went outside. I was smoking cigarettes at the time. And I went outside to the lanai with my dad's 5 journals. And I was just bawling. And I was just so angry. I was so angry. And basically the words were like, how could you have done this to me? Why did you leave me here with them? How come you didn't leave a note? Like, I can't believe you abandoned me. I was also very mad at God. Like, I felt like I was going through this spiritual awakening, and I was very angry at God. I was so tired of like holding this thing called suicide, surviving. And so I was just bawling my head off. And then all of a sudden, I heard the words, "You're not lacking a suicide note. You're just failing to see the gift in your dad's 5 journals." And it was calm. It was clear. It was direct. So I don't know what you want to call it. I personally think it was an angel, God, I don't know. It was a higher being other than myself, because I was not in the headspace to even muster up those types of words. I was completely out of my mind and having like a complete meltdown. It was my own voice. It wasn't like I was hearing voices, but at the same time I was. But it was so abrupt. I flipped my head around because I felt like someone else was there. And of course, I looked both ways and there's a wall behind me. So nobody could be behind me. Josh wasn't out there. None of my kids were out there. So there was literally zero explanation. And then in that moment, I just realized there was so much truth to that. Holy shit. Like, here I was holding on to this one thing that I was lacking and not seeing what was right in front of me, the gifts that were right in front of me. Here I was fixated on not having a suicide note. And somebody on the outside would be like, yeah, but you have these beautiful 5 journals. But I was so blinded by the pain and so blinded by this thing that I didn't have, I couldn't see it. So here I had these 2 years worth of his deepest, darkest, raw emotions of what exactly led him. And the last journal entry he wrote was 5 days before. And it said basically something to the effect of, the divorce is coming. I'm preparing for the big storm. So that was very telling to me. It was very methodical too. So like the day before, he went out and bought electrical wire. It was very contemplated. He knew what he was doing. And so after that whole ordeal on the lanai, I basically had the idea to transcribe his journals. And so I sat for weeks, a couple months, I think, just transcribing them. And I was just left with this story of pain, of everything that you and I feel, you know, just all of the heartbreak, all of the emotions, all of the shame, all of the railing against what is, just everything, just regular life emotions. I just realized that, okay, I can do something with this. And that's really what kind of thrusted me into, I can use my dad's suicide to help with these types of situations, not necessarily for suicide prevention, but if this emotional pain was what led my dad to suicide, maybe I can just carve out a little corner of the world to help people feel a little less pain. And maybe, just maybe, they will not end their life. And that's why I became a coach. I was in real estate at the time. I hated what I was doing. And so I became a coach and worked on a lot about the mindset and, you know, mind shifts and things like that. And over the years, obviously, it's shifted into more, I call it unshakable piece. And what's been really beautiful and interesting about all of it is I've had so many clients tell me after we've worked together for, 12 weeks, sometimes a year, they'd come to me after our work was done, or they said, I think I'm good now. I don't need to renew. And they'd say, I didn't tell you this. And thank God they didn't. I didn't tell you this, but you were my last hope. I was really seriously considering suicide. And it's because of the work that I've been doing with you that I'm looking at life completely different. And that is just always humbling because it's what led me on this path. You know, my dad's suicide is essentially what thrusted me into learning how to heal and to not suffer in life, no matter what's happening in my world. So it's just been sort of this like full circle, beautiful moment. Where I stand today, I'm 100% obviously, I would love to have my dad on this earth. But at the same time, I am so incredibly grateful for everything that I went through from my dad's suicide. I wouldn't change it. Like if I could go back, I probably wouldn't change it just because there's so many gifts that came out of that. Like who I am as a mother, how I show up as a mother, there's just so many gifts. Obviously, as I continue to heal, the blaming my mom completely just dissolved because you cannot stay with somebody just because they're suicidal. And I actually have compassion and I see my mom as being courageous for leaving, you know, and ultimately recognizing that nobody's happiness is dependent on anybody. Even for Evan, you know, in Evan's attempt, I'm not responsible for anybody's happiness or peace. They are. And I was able to recognize that with my mom and my dad. You know, everyone has their own journey to walk and their own path, and they have to sometimes hit the rock bottom. Like with Evan, you know, I knew this was his rock bottom, and he has to go through it. But it's hard, you know, knowing that. But you know that your kids are gonna have to walk through those fires, as painful as it is. At the same time, it's carving them into the person that they're meant to become.
For those that are listening who have dealt with loved ones attempting suicide or even going through with suicide, but especially for a mother who has a child who makes an attempt, like what are just to leave us with some advice or words of wisdom? Like where do they turn? What should be like the first thing, you know, once they're home and reality starts to set in? You know, what can they do to not just lose themselves?
Feel their emotions. Let it all come bubbling up to the surface, because it will. But I look at things as things come up, like for me, that the shame and the guilt and all of that, it had to come up. It was there. And it's coming up to be healed. And it didn't necessarily have to have anything to do with Evan. His situation ignited it, but it was coming up to be healed. So things that are, you know, the ugly parts of you that are coming up, let them come up. Look at them, because that's your opportunity to release them and really look them in the eyes and say, okay, what's here for me to learn? What lessons and blessings are here for me to take away from this experience? You know, like for me, it was self-love. I really learned how to really love and forgive myself for who I was and not needing to be perfect. I think stillness is another tool, because as things are coming up, it's easy to chatter with everybody and to get all of the insight from everybody else and get all the wisdom and the advice from everybody else. I say, use your intuition. And in order to hear your intuition, you have to quiet that monkey mind. And in order to do that, you have to carve out time for yourself and get quiet. Not necessarily even meditation, but just, you know, hands on heart, closing your eyes for a second, tuning in, letting the noise kind of swirl around, the thoughts, the attack thoughts, the judgments, the criticisms, like sit there, but see it as a storm that's just swirling around you without fully identifying with the thoughts in the storm. Let the chaos swirl around you, because it's going to, but then anchor into that stillness that's within you. I think also a part of it is paying attention to the meanings that you're making of things. You know, what are you making this circumstance mean? What I did was I journaled. Evan's attempts means that, and I just went on a tangent. It means that I'm a bad mom. It means blah, blah, blah. It means this and that. And I just let it all come up. And then I remember sitting back in my chair and looking at it and being like, this is bullshit. Like, I fucking love my child till no end, unconditionally. Like, these are all just stories, and I'm making the meaning out of them, and I'm suffering because of these stories, and they're all just BS. So look at the stories that you're making out of the meanings that are happening around your events and the crisis or the, you know, issue, the challenge that's happening right now. And then I think the other part is letting go of resistance. And what I mean by that is I think so many times we rail against life and what is, and we say this shouldn't be happening. my child shouldn't be X, Y, and Z. I shouldn't be X, Y, and Z. He shouldn't be. And we have this sort of push and pull, and we're railing against what is. And when it comes down to it, you can't change the events that are happening to you right now. You just can't. They're happening. And so you don't want to add a layer of resistance on top of what's already happening, because when you do that, you create more of a disconnect within yourself. And when you create a disconnect in yourself, you can't be present for your child, for yourself, for your family, and what needs to be handled on the outside. So letting go of railing against what is opens the door to acceptance. You don't have to like what is. You don't have to fucking be grateful for what is. You just have to accept it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And I know I'm making it sound simple, but you just have to accept it and say, this is what I'm dealing with. One of my mantras that I remember repeating to myself was, this too belongs. This belongs in my life right now. This belongs. And what happens is your nervous system just stops fighting, and then you can relax more. And when you're relaxed, that's when intuition comes in. That's when you feel more grounded. You become less snappy, less on edge, less fragile, and more grounded, no matter what's swirling around you.
Those are all really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the toolbox that I did. There's power in the pause.
Yeah.
And I think that's so essential for a mother or anybody who's going through a really life challenging and changing situation. There's so much power in the pause, because we're constantly on our phones. We have emails, we have kids, we have demands, we have this, and society says, pay attention over here. Oh no, look over here. Look over here. This is important. That's important. Check over here. And we fail to just stop and pause.
Right.
So true.
Again, like one of my favorite things to this day, I've been probably doing it for 8 years, is hand on heart. Just hand on heart. And actually, the Heart Math Institute did a study that showed the positive effects of it literally calming your nervous system. If you hold your hand on your heart for, I want to say the study said like 17 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that. But you just put your hand on your heart and it calms your nervous system. So that's one of my favorite, very quick hacks, because feeling relaxed and calm is foundational to how you show up for the rest of the day and the rest of the, the challenge, the crisis.
Yeah. Amen, bro. So now's the time for you to give yourself a little plug. So if people are really touched by what you had to say, and I don't know how they couldn't be, if they want to talk to you, if they want to work with you, how can people reach out to you? How can they find you? Rattle off your books as well.
So you can just go to jodyagard.com, JODYAGARD.com. They can play around with the website. And also on my site, if they go to the tab called Start Your Journey, I actually offer a free 30-minute session with me if they're interested in that.
And how long have you been doing this now? Remind me, the life coaching?
15 years, almost 15 years.
Wow. Dang,
Yeah, that's
girl.
amazing.
That is awesome.
Yep. I was coaching before coaching was cool.
Yeah, that's what I said to her. I was like, yeah, she's been doing life coaching thing for forever. I said she was doing it before it was trendy. I didn't even know what that meant when I found out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the name of your first book?
The first one is called Let Love In, a practical guide to love and happiness. And then the second one was Mommy Reboot, a busy mom's guide to self-care. Both of them are on Amazon.
Thank you so much for coming on and being so vulnerable and sharing. That's really heavy stuff.
Thank you for having me.
The way that you handled things and your perspective on everything is really beautiful. And we're big preachers on finding your purpose, and you've definitely found your purpose.
Yep. Through the pain. There's pain and purpose.
Yep.
Thank you so much for dealing with our internet issues.
Oh yeah, no worries. It happens.
All right, girl. You have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
We're so grateful that you joined us today. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who might need it too. You can find us at ican'tevenimagine.com or connect with us on Facebook at ican'tevenimagine a podcast for moms, or Instagram at ICEI_podcast.
And don't forget, there's purpose in your path, even if you can't see it yet.